This is a first in our session for leadership development. Welcome. We're excited that you're here. One of the biggest things that we're looking to do in this session is to be able to increase our influence as leaders. So the big question I have for you is, how's your mindset? Because mindset directly impacts everything we do in leadership. What's your current story about communication? What are your current situations? How many of you have thought to yourself, oh my gosh, I just need to run away. What did I sign myself up for? Are you ready to get focused on clarity, to increase your influence as a leader? Well, in our session today, we have some goals. And the big goals is to truly realize that we've gone through a trauma. We've had some experiences over this past year with changing standard operating procedures. Maybe we've had some experiences with things that we are uncertain of in our communities. One of the big things in our organization is realizing that our staff, our people, have lived through situations that might have been challenging. And when people are living through challenging times, it requires important leadership tips, including empathy, the ability to listen, and the ability to try to, again, encourage and promote and influence. Let's get clear. One of the biggest things we talk about is realizing expectations. What are our expectations? What are our staff's expectations? What's the expectation of the organization? So let's say Dave or Martina came in tomorrow and they said, you know what? If you do a great job today, I'm going to give you $1,000 bonus. If you do an average job, you're going to get to keep your job. But if you do a bad job today, you're fired. What would be the first thing you'd want to know? In leadership, it becomes essential to be able to give great expectations that are clear and specific for individuals, because perceptions sometimes get in our way. You know, right off the bat, sometimes people will say, I really want to know what great looks like. Tell me what I need to do to be great today. And when we get specific, a lot of times people will say, well, I want a good attitude. Well, what does that exactly look like? That means maybe you're smiling, you're taking initiative, you're finding things to do without having to be told. You're, again, asking questions. Get very specific on what you consider great. Same with average. Sometimes people come to work and they just basically say, what do I need to do to get by to make sure I don't lose my job? What is it that, again, I need to be able to do to be able to sustain this? There are some days where maybe average is as good as we can get, because maybe we have a lot of other things that are happening outside of the workplace that are causing impact in our performance. But sometimes, again, we have to be clear as if we do a bad job, what does that mean? What does that look like? This is where, again, we have to get very specific. And many times our attendance policies, our human resource policies kind of identify some of the things that may happen if you're not doing well. Maybe you get so many times before you get put on a performance improvement plan. In those performance improvement plans, you're giving so many days or, again, months to be able to improve particular areas. But we have to get specific. For example, how many times have you had somebody say, well, I just want people to show up on time? What does on time mean? To some of us, on time means show up 15 minutes before you're supposed to be there and be ready to go when things start. For example, you know, sometimes we talk about 8 o'clock and some of us will say, well, I show up at 7:45, so I'm ready to go at 8 o'clock. Some of us will say, well, I'm on time. I was here at 8. Again, being very specific. One of the biggest things in leadership is being able to say, hey, if we start at 8 o'clock, I'd like you here at 7:45 so that you're ready to go at 8 o'clock. You're in your station ready to work, or whatever that so be, whatever that looks like for your department. But again, we've got to get more clear on what our expectations are. because people have different perceptions. And when they have different perceptions, we've got to be able to spell out those expectations in advance and in vivid terms. What are we specifically looking for? But then also, people always want to know, how am I doing? One of the biggest things in leadership, when you set expectations, highlight when people are doing what you like them to do. Make rounds and highlight the things that people are doing well. And get specific, not just, hey, good job today, but hey, I really liked how you were interacting with that machine, how you were able to get great production. You know, your welds are straight and spot on. Giving specific positive feedback helps people know how they're being measured. And if you have somebody who maybe isn't meeting those expectations, then it becomes time to have conversations and letting people know what the consequences are based on their actual performances. You know, if you have people who come in and maybe aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, first of all, you have to ask yourself, is it a training issue? Do they need more training? Maybe it's an attitude issue. Is there something happening outside of the workplace that is impacting their performance? Have those conversations. Hey, I've noticed things are a little bit different for you. What's going on? Is there something I can do to support you? Letting people know those expectations and not ignoring things, because sometimes we will ignore things. And I always say, whatever we ignore, we allow. So if you see something, say something, but be very specific. Not, hey, you can't do it that way. Hey, I've noticed you're doing it this way. Have you tried this? Have you thought about this? Here's what a great job looks like. Here's what an average job looks like. And here's what you're fired looks like. And when you see the word SMART, again, S, specific. M is measurable. We can't manage what we can't measure. A, of course, is being able to make sure that it is articulated, what you want. Is it realistic? Is it timely? And make things smart. Because again, if it's not smart, there's a lot of open opportunity for perception and assumptions. And that's when drama sometimes happens within the workplace. Well, I can give you a directive right off the bat, and I can say, connect all dots with 4 straight lines. Your expectation, connect all 4 dots with 4 straight lines. I think it's pretty simple. I think it's pretty direct. However, it's not. Because oftentimes people will try to connect the dots with all 4 straight lines, and they will have different versions all the way around. Take a minute. Try to connect the 4. Will you get it the way I'm asking you to? Some of you may, because you have seen this before. Some of you may not have seen this before, so you don't have any previous knowledge. Some of you might say, Lisa, I did connect all 4 dots, but it doesn't look like this. What assumptions did you make? Again, I was not specific in what I was asking for. I just said 4 straight lines. I didn't give you specific examples of once you start, you have to keep your pen on the paper. You cannot lift it up. You have to be able to go outside of the box or outside of the lines. You have to be able to think differently. So what assumptions did you make? And how would you have gotten more specific so that you get the exact prototype? That's why it becomes super important to understand how we define our requirements. For example, hey, you know what? I really want you to get involved. I want you to have initiative. Very vague. You know, ask questions like, hey, what can I do to make a difference? How can I support you? If I were asking you as an employee of mine to take initiative, I would say, I'm looking for someone who can look for solutions for problems that might not exist yet. Again, I might look for someone who is asking questions, who is going that extra mile to be able to say, hey, this is what I see. This is what I project. Here's what we could go and do differently. Getting specific. The same, you know what? I really want you to be able to generate ideas. And if you generate ideas, you have a problem, maybe you're going to offer up a solution. And maybe you'll be willing to collaborate and be a part of the team that helps with this solution. That's where a lot of your continuous improvement comes from. Generating ideas on how we can be more efficient, value stream, what can we do to, again, cut out waste, 5S'ing, what do we need to do to be more efficient in our workstations? If I ask you to generate ideas, I'm going to get very specific. Offer a solution. You know what? I'm also going to ask you maybe to anticipate what's happening, what could happen. Communicate that. You know, sometimes if there's something that's happening that maybe we see might get in the way of things down the line, maybe we need to say something instead of just pushing things through and not worrying about quality. So again, I always ask people to anticipate what is happening, what could happen, and share that. And one of the biggest things I talk about is the SBAR. You know, if you have people coming into your office and they're like, oh my gosh, I have so many things going wrong, and I can't believe this person did this and this person did this. And I always like to stop somebody and say, do you have an SBAR? Do you have the situation? Tell me what's going on. What's the background? What led up to this situation? What's your current assessment of as to what's happening, and what's your recommendation for what we could do different? That SBAR helps people come to you as a leader with potential answers to their problems. And they are now becoming a part of the problem solving process instead of the problem naming process. So again, anytime somebody comes to me, I would say, do you have an SBAR? Tell me what the situation is, what's the background, what's your current assessment, and what's your recommendation? That sometimes stops that whole process of, do you have a minute? I just want to share this with you. I just think you need to know this. That's what's called, so what? What do we need to do? So you've shared some ideas, so what? Now what has to happen? So if you ever look up or Google, so what, now what, in leadership, it's when people bring you a bunch of things and they just say, I just want you to know, but they don't have any answers to the problems. Then again, it's kind of that, well, that's, so what? So what that's happened? What do we need to do to go from here? And that helps in your influence and your leadership. But then also it's important to remember, what expectations do people have for us as a leader? You know, they're always asking, what are great places to work? What are engaging places to work? What helps lower your turnover rate? What are some things that people want from bosses? What do they want from their leaders? And whenever they're doing assessments, Gallup does a lot of assessments in looking at engagement within the workplace. And one of the biggest things people say is they want to feel appreciated. And they want to have clarity. You know, oftentimes we think communication is a problem. It's the clarity of the communication. Maybe we are not specific enough. Maybe we don't have a common goal. Whenever we have a common goal, it helps us say, is this behavior getting us to this goal or not? Is this helping us get to the goal, or is it getting in the way? Setting these goals. I always like to ask, what's your mission statement? How many people can actually rattle off the mission statement? If you can rattle off the mission statement, it makes it easier to know what your actual process is. So setting some goals. I used to work for Disney World, and one of the biggest things we had as a mission statement was, we create happiness by providing the best of entertainment for people of all ages. That's specific. You're creating happiness. And so whenever you're faced with a situation where you're like, oh gosh, I really don't want to do this, you have a problem. Well, you can ask yourself, is this going to help us get to our goal of creating happiness, or is this going to hurt our goal of creating happiness? People want goals, and they want frequent, immediate feedback. Again, people want to know, how am I doing? And not just day one, but I'll tell you, the first 90 days, people want lots of feedback because of the fact that they're doing something different. They have changed. And whenever you're changing, your brain sometimes wants to go into negative and get consumed with all the things that maybe aren't working. If you as a leader can give frequent, immediate feedback on what is working, that's going to help you stay connected. And again, Gallup will say, if each employee has one person they feel understands them, acknowledges them, appreciates them, they are highly likely to stay engaged with the company, less likely to leave. So again, what are those expectations from your staff? And one of the big things with expectations is we've got to tell people often. In listening, we have a tendency to only remember about 25% of what's said. And so it becomes important for us to tell them, show them, and tell them again. And sometimes people will be like, well, I've already told them once. Sometimes we have to say things 7, 8 different times, 8 different ways, because again, we only remember 25%. So setting expectations is easy if you remember to do it. And oftentimes we make assumptions. We may think we've said something, but maybe we don't. And the more specific we can be, the better it is. For example, instead of saying, hey, can you finish up this report by the end of the day? It's coming out on a question form. Not going to engage necessarily in an ego balance or a power struggle, but it's not specific enough. Say instead, hey, can you gather the sales data? Can you put it into the same format as the Anderson report you did last week? And can you ask Karen to proofread it for you? Again, a little more specific. But what if you even got truly, truly specific and said, I need to have this finalized report by 5 o'clock today. I already told Karen to expect that report for proofreading by 4 o'clock at the latest. Does that work for you? Again, the more specific you can be, the less time it takes for somebody to interpret what you are saying and to actually do it. So again, tell them, show them, and tell them again. And always, always, always emphasize the why of the expectations. Don't just tell staff members what they are, tell them why these are important. And when you know that they're helping the mission of the organization, it's going to help people start to see the company as a whole and not just necessarily in their department. It's going to help start breaking down silos. If you have silos between departments, again, we've got to look at the mission and are these behaviors helping or hurting? And beyond communicating the importance of your expectations, always break down the why in as much detail as possible to minimize confusion. Give concrete examples if you can. And again, it helps you show people these certain expectations you have and how they can connect the big picture goals of the company. A lot of times people are like, I just need to get people to show up. Well, being on time for work ensures that operations will run smoothly. Displaying a positive attitude works and helps employees deal with stress and keeps our morale up. Do you want to work at a place that is a great place to work? Keep that attitude moving, but tell people why the expectations are important. And when you tell them, you can coach them. Oftentimes people will say, well, I'm a coaching manager, I'm a coaching leader. That's awesome. When you're coaching, you're asking people, hey, how can I support you? Where are you at today? What's working today? Where do we need to go today? Here's the expectations for today. What's it going to take for us to get there? What do we need to keep doing? What do we need to stop doing? What do we need to start doing? These types of things surrounding the expectation is going to be much more helpful than just blowing up because something isn't being met. Where are you at today? How many are you going to be able to output today? We're looking to be able to send this many on the trucks today. What's it going to take us to get there? What do we need to keep doing, stop doing, start doing? Can I touch base with you and after 2 hours to see where we're at? Again, that coaching piece becomes essential in helping people feel as though they're connected and engaged. You're not walking around saying, you better get this done by 3 o'clock. You have to have this on the truck ready to go. That becomes very challenging for people. And people don't see you as a leader. They see you as somebody who's kind of a demanding manager. When you're looking at leadership, you're trying to get people to do things that they maybe normally didn't think they could do or wanted to do. You're empowering them through your communication. And when you empower through your communication, one of the biggest things I would encourage people to do is be empathetic if somebody is experiencing something that's overwhelming. This past year with COVID and being essential, there's been a lot of individuals who have had some pain that has happened. People have lost loved ones. People have had struggles with their schedules. People have, again, maybe had frustration with not being able to do things they loved. There's been some pain for people. And a lot of times that pain manifests as anger in the workplace. And a lot of times people are like, why are they so angry? What's going on? Acknowledge the pain. Perhaps the best thing you can do is to just acknowledge how that other person feels. I know we've got this cut today at 4 o'clock. I know this has to be in the truck by 4 o'clock. I realize I've asked you to do a lot of other things as well. What do I need to do to help you or support you to be able to get this done? What's it going to take to make this happen? And sometimes I always say, share how you feel. I realize we've been asked to do a lot more with less. Many people are being asked to do a lot more with less. What can we do to support each other to make sure that this happens today? I'm just as frustrated as you are that things aren't going as smoothly as we'd like them to go. But right now, here's what we have to get done. This is what's going to take. It's going to take. What do we need to do to make sure that this happens? If somebody's coming to you with frustration, maybe they're upset, maybe they're, again, seeing things differently. Maybe they're really fighting for something that you're wondering yourself, why are they fighting so hard for what they're fighting for? Well, show gratitude to somebody that brings you this situation. I appreciate you bringing this to my attention. I realize this must be frustrating for you, especially if you're feeling that they're feeling stressed out because of expectations. I realize this must be frustrating. People sometimes, again, want help with time management. And the way that you as a leader can help them with time management is helping them prioritize the things on their plate that need to be done today, right now, what's considered urgent, what's not urgent, what's not important. And showing some interest in that is going to help people kind of connect with you and say, oh, okay, he does kind of understand me. She gets it. She sees it. You're, again, kind of turning into this support system for this person. And so one of the biggest things I encourage people to do in empathetic listening and language, how can I support you? What can I do to help you? But what are you going to do as well? What are you choosing to do? What's happening for you? How can you get this done? And how can I support you in that? When you're being empathetic, it also helps you when you're having situations where somebody made a mistake. If somebody makes a mistake and you jump down their throat like, oh my God, I can't believe you did that wrong. And this is terrible. And this is so, what are we going to do? You're creating fear. And when you create fear, you open up opportunities for anger, resentment, frustration, and again, people disconnecting. So with empathetic listening, it sounds like blank when blank. Sounds like you get frustrated when you don't have the tools necessary to make this happen. What do we need to do different? What can I do to support you? What can you do to make this work? It must be frustrating when things don't go the way you expect them to go. What I'm hearing you say is, again, you're using empathetic listening language if somebody's bringing you a particular problem. One of the big things that we look at is if somebody makes a mistake, it's always important to ask, what worked here? What didn't work? And what are you going to do different next time? These are all great questions to ask when something doesn't go well. Maybe something broke down. Maybe there's a line stop. The only time you can be somewhat aggressive is if it's a safety issue. If you notice somebody might be questioning and maybe potentially causing harm, then you can say, oh my God, you need to stop. But if it's truly just, again, a mistake that's happening, hey, what worked, what didn't work, what do you need to do different next time? People know the answers within. If they don't know the answers, you can pose it to them of, have you thought about it this way? Have you tried it this way? Anytime you pose it in a question form, you're reducing that fear. And then it becomes, oh my God, I'm not being necessarily punished, but I'm trying to learn from this. Because some of the biggest learning happens when mistakes are made. When you get to that process of empathy and people start to see you as somebody who, again, gets it, I'm not asking you to be a pushover in any way. Sometimes people are like, oh, that sounds too fluffy. I don't want to be that way. You can be assertive without being aggressive. And you can be empathetic with still having high expectations for people. I'm sorry you're going through this, but I really need you to be here at work. What's it going to take to be able to be here? Man, that does really suck. That's got to be challenging, but I really need you to be here. What do we need to do? Again, giving an empathetic phrase validates that you're acknowledging that, yeah, maybe they are going through a difficult time, but what do they need to do to make sure that they're meeting those expectations? And that's where you can start to brainstorm. But when you start with an empathy phrase, it makes it easier to brainstorm because people don't shut down. They don't get angry or frustrated. They don't feel like they're being ridiculed or judged. They're just basically saying, okay, what do I need to do? So the more empathetic phrases you can do, the higher your influence is going to be. But please don't minimize. Sometimes if somebody comes to you with a situation, we might want to kind of roll our eyes and go, yeah, okay, whatever. It's not that big of a deal. Just let it go. If we minimize, again, this could have been a blessing or something better is around the corner. The minute we minimize, we are devaluing somebody's experiences. So again, it must be frustrating that you've had this happen. I realize this can be overwhelming. What do we need to do to move forward? And the big thing is to always remember your style of communication and the style of the people you are communicating with. Again, if you haven't had a chance to take the colors or the DISC leadership self-personality assessment, it gives you a chance to highlight, we have 4 different ways of being, 4 different ways of communicating, 4 different ways of working in the workplace. Some of us can be very fast-paced. We like to make things happen. We want to see big picture. We don't want to get consumed with too many details. We might want to be a part of the relationships. We want to make friends when we're at work. We want to have some social opportunity to engage. We might be able to kind of want policy, procedure. We think that's essential. And we want to be able to look at research, data. What's the best practice? I always like to say, don't call it a best practice, call it a promising practice, because we can always change and be 1% better. But remembering your style of yourself, as well as remembering the style of the people you're working with. When you're seeing an orange or a D, they're very bold, straightforward, to the point. They have a lot of energy. They may talk fast. They may walk fast. They may forget to say good morning because they have a lot of things on their mind. Again, realizing that their goal is results. If you have a blue or an I, they're about checking in to make sure that people are being treated fairly. They're all about relationships. They want to maybe engage with people. They're the ones that want to ask how things are going. They might want to talk about how things are going within the outside of work. They're the ones in the meetings that are trying to make sure that every stakeholder has a voice. They're the ones that are coming to you saying, hey, what about second shift? What about first shift? They're trying to, again, be advocates. That's the who, focused on relationships. Then you maybe have the S or the yellow, the gold. They're focused on the how. How do you want this done? Give me a checklist. What's the checklist? What's on that expectation? What needs to be done first? What's considered urgent? What's considered not urgent? What's a priority? What's not a priority? They want to know the details of the how. And again, they want to be able to get some recognition for that. Again, you see often the golds or the S's can become your worker bees. They're the ones that are, again, trying to process to make sure things are going as planned. And then your green style or your C style are the ones that are looking at thinking first and then acting. They want to look at all the research. They want to look at all the detail. They want to be able to think on things, not just quickly coming up with things off the top of their head. They want time to do their homework. If maybe you have an employee who is a green or a C style, and maybe you notice that they're not doing what's expected, And instead of just going right at them, they may want time to think about it. They may want you to say, hey, can we talk today about 3 o'clock about this and this? They might want some time to process. So again, in any type of communication and communicating your expectations, realize again that we have 4 different styles. Now we have all of these colors within us, but we have a preferred style of communicating. And with that preferred style, again, orange or D's want results. Blues or I's want relationships. S's or green or golds want some recognition for your job that's done. And greens or C's want, of course, research and information and best practices. So know your style. And the biggest thing is be careful not to make assumptions. So when I say assumptions, oftentimes we think we're communicating clearly, and maybe we're not. For example, I was riding along with a friend of mine who's an engineer, very literal in his demeanor, and we were driving down the road, and I said, hey, Tim, there's a Dairy Queen. And he kept driving. I'm like, what are you doing? I just said there's a Dairy Queen. He's like, yeah, so you just said there was a Dairy Queen. Okay. And I'm like, well, I thought you would stop. He's like, well, then you need to tell me to stop. You just said there was a Dairy Queen. So what? There's a store over there. There's a gas station over there. If you want me to stop, you need to tell me, hey, Tim, stop at the Dairy Queen. So we had a little bit of a conversation as to why we were miscommunicating for about 10 miles. But again, don't assume. Make sure you're specific. And oftentimes we're not specific enough in communication. And that's why there's so many stories that sometimes get created because of it. And we make assumptions then. You know, I went into an assumption of why isn't he pulling over to the Dairy Queen? He must not care about me. I guess I'm not good enough for him. And you start to create these stories in your mind because you didn't have enough specific information. So realize too that when you do communicate your expectations, we want to make sure that we are using an adult voice. There's 3 different ways that we can communicate things, and there's different voices. There's what's called a parent voice. If you're coming across as a parent, like you need to, you better, you should, I want you to think of a parent who is, again, maybe a little bit more angry, maybe a little more impatient, maybe uses language like you're never going to be able to do this, or, you know, I'm tired of always doing this for you. You might get critical. You might have some posturing language or patronizing language. Just be careful with that so you don't sound sometimes like an angry, frustrated parent. Because if you have anybody who's come out of a situation where maybe we had some abuse, maybe there was some issues in the family, and you sound like maybe a parent, they might automatically get some pushback and some retaliation. So again, watch your tone. It's not necessarily what you say, it's how you say it. And when you get into that parent tone, you're probably going to expect that person to push back in a child tone. And that's where they might be saying, you can't make me do this. I'm not doing this. I'm going to HR. I might start whining. I might have roll my eyes. And, again, this is just the stupidest thing ever. You're the worst boss ever. It initiates a power struggle. So watch your tone of voice. When you get into a tone of voice that sounds like an adult, that's where you want to be. That's where you're, again, trying to be physically attentive, interested, straightforward. And you're asking questions like, have you ever thought about this? From my experience, would this work for you? Asking high impact questions like, why are you fighting so hard for what you're fighting for? What do you think is your SBAR? What's your recommendation? Again, using that adult voice helps in your communication. The big thing is to be able to, again, identify what are your expectations and how are you going to measure it in yourself and how are you going to measure it in the people that you lead. Again, be as specific as possible. So write out your definition of success. Is it, of course, maybe, hey, I want to increase my retention rate for my staff. I want to increase productivity within my staff. I want to reduce the drama within my staff. What is your definition of success? How will you know you're a successful leader? Oftentimes people tell me, well, I'm a successful leader if nobody quits. Or I'm a successful leader if we don't have any drama. Or I'm a successful leader because people want to come work for me. And again, I have a waiting list to come to work in my department. And try again to think of one behavior. And again, we can't change personality, but we can change behavior. What is a behavior you want to try to increase in your team? I want you to make rounds and find people doing things well. Highlight that to them. Hey, great job with this process right here. It looks like you're able to output more than you thought. Be specific. And then tell me, how did you present the goal to the team? What worked, what didn't work? What are you going to do different next time? That becomes your process for your homework. And in session 2, of course, we give you a chance to kind of highlight that, see what's happening, and discuss what are your definitions of success, how are you sharing that with your team, and what are you doing to measure that? Be as specific as possible. So thank you for joining us today in this process. Look forward to seeing you again. And as we continue with this process, if there's any questions, comments, or concerns, please reach out to HR. And thank you so much for being a part of session 1. Go communicate your expectations well. Thanks so much.